Hey, yeah, you. All of you who walked in here thinking you were too much, or not enough, or somehow both at the same time. Good to see you, truly. This one's for the people who didn't mean to cause chaos, but somehow did anyway. Look, let's just say it out loud, because pretending otherwise is exhausting. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't throw punches, you didn't scheme, you didn't even try, and yet everyone around you cracked at the same time. See, that's the part that messes with your head. You're sitting there like, what just happened? You were just being honest, or quiet, or focused, or done explaining yourself for the 1000th time. And suddenly, boom, group meltdown, mass emotional short circuit, and you're standing there thinking, was it something I said? But deep down, you already know, it wasn't. Here's the uncomfortable truth they don't like saying out loud. You didn't break them. You exposed the cracks that were already there. See, people love stability. Fake stability. The kind held together by politeness, small talk, shared delusions. And then you show up, not loud, not aggressive, just real. You stop laughing on cue. You stop agreeing to nonsense. You stop shrinking to make rooms feel comfortable. And the whole thing collapses because you accidentally became a mirror. That's the part that's darkly hilarious if you really think about it. You didn't swing the hammer. You just stood there while the glass realized it was fragile. And yeah, some of them panicked. Some got angry. Some played victim. Some tried to paint you as the problem because accountability feels like acid on their skin. But look at the pattern. It wasn't one person. It wasn't one moment. It was everyone, all at once. That doesn't happen unless you hit something structural. You know what really set them off? It wasn't your words. It was your calm, your refusal to beg, your decision to stop over-explaining your existence like it needs a permission slip. See, when you stop performing, when you stop managing everyone else's emotions, people who rely on that collapse. They don't know who they are without you cushioning reality for them, so they melt down. And here's where the power sneaks in, real quiet. You didn't even want this power. You weren't chasing dominance. You weren't trying to disrupt anything. You just reached a point where you thought, I can't keep betraying myself just to keep the peace. And the peace was fake. That's why it's funny in that twisted, uncomfortable way, because the moment you chose yourself, even accidentally, the whole illusion fell apart. Short pause. Let that sit. You see, people talk a lot about being strong, but real strength, it's non-participation. It's not reacting. It's not fixing what you didn't break. It's you standing there while everyone else loses their grip, thinking, wow, so that's what was holding all this together. And yeah, it might have hurt, because some of those people mattered to you. Some of those explosions came from places you once tried to protect. But here's the thing they won't admit. If your absence of self-betrayal causes chaos, the system was rotten. You didn't destroy the room. You just stopped propping up the walls. And look, I know there's a part of you that feels guilty. Like maybe you should have softened it, explained more, stayed smaller. But listen closely, because this part matters. You going back wouldn't fix anything. It would only delay the next collapse. So yeah, you accidentally broke everyone at once. Not because you're cruel, not because you're careless, but because you're done pretending. And the dark humor of it all, you didn't even have to try. You just existed honestly. And for people built on denial, that's enough to bring the whole thing down. Because once you see that, you can't unsee it. And yeah, that realization hits weird, heavy, kind of sharp around the edges. You start replaying moments in your head, you know, that silence that made someone uncomfortable, that boundary that made someone snap, that calm response that somehow felt like an insult to them. And you're sitting there thinking, look, I wasn't trying to make a statement. You were just tired of pretending, tired of smoothing things over, tired of being the emotional shock absorber for people who refuse to grow up. Here's the part nobody prepares you for. When you stop absorbing the impact, the crash gets loud. Because some people don't want truth. They want consistency. They want you predictable, manageable, slightly apologetic for existing with a spine. And when you quietly step out of that role, they don't ask questions. They don't self-reflect. They freak out. Full system error. You become the villain in their story not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing extra, stopped overgiving, stopped translating yourself into something easier to digest. And see, that's where the power creeps in again, real subtle. Because you're not screaming, you're not threatening, you're not flexing, you're just not folding. And that messes with people more than aggression ever could. Short breath. Because this part stings. Some of them genuinely believed you'd always be there to stabilize things. Always be the reasonable one. Always be the one who takes the hit, swallows the discomfort, keeps the group intact. And the moment you didn't, they spiraled. Not because you hurt them, because you reminded them they were standing on borrowed balance. And yeah, there's a dark kind of humor in watching people who called you too quiet, suddenly unable to handle silence. People who said you were too intense, completely unraveling when you stopped dulling yourself. People who claimed they were fine, absolutely losing it when you didn't rush in to save them. You didn't push, you didn't provoke, you didn't even explain. You just stayed still. And stillness exposes everything. You know what's wild? Somewhere along the way you realize you're not actually amused by the meltdown itself. You're amused by the clarity. Because for the first time, the math adds up. The arguments, the passive-aggressive comments, the sudden distance, the dramatic exits. It all traces back to one moment, you choosing yourself without announcing it. And there's this shift inside you, slow, almost uncomfortable, where guilt starts losing its grip. Because you're seeing it clearly now. If your emotional labor was the glue, then your exhaustion was inevitable. You weren't valued for who you were. You were valued for what you buffered. And when the buffer disappeared, the noise rushed in. Heartbeat, pause. That's when something dangerous clicks. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. You realize you don't actually need to correct the narrative. You don't need to convince anyone you're not the villain. You don't need to chase understanding from people who collapse under honesty. Because the ones who can't survive your boundaries were never meant to stand next to you. Once you stopped kneeling. And yeah, part of you still feels that pull to fix, to soften, to explain. Old wiring, old survival tactics. But another part of you is standing there, watching the chaos with clear eyes, thinking, wow, all that noise. And all you did was stop abandoning yourself. You didn't raise the temperature. You removed the insulation, and the heat was already there. And once that clicks, there's this strange calm that settles in your chest. Not peace, not relief, just clarity. The kind that doesn't ask permission. You start noticing things you used to ignore. The way people only felt safe when you were confused. The way your certainty made them itchy, defensive, loud. The way your silence suddenly got labeled as arrogance when it used to be called easygoing. Funny how that works. You know, there's this myth people love to repeat, that confidence looks like speeches and bold moves and chest-out declarations. Nah, real confidence is quieter than that. It's you not correcting people when they misunderstand you. It's you not chasing the version of yourself they preferred because it was easier to control. And yeah, that shift freaks people out because you're not explaining anymore. Not justifying, not doing emotional customer service. You're listening, watching, clocking patterns, and the room starts to feel different. Some people get awkward, some get hostile, some start projecting like it's an Olympic sport. They'll say you've changed, they'll say you're cold, they'll say you think you're better than everyone. But look, you know the truth. You didn't grow an ego. You grew a spine. And here's the part that messes with your emotions a little. You still care. You're not heartless. You're not numb. You just stopped confusing empathy with self-erasure. That's a hard line for people who survive by leaning on others. Because when you step back, they don't just lose you. They lose the illusion that they were standing on their own. And you can feel it, can't you? That subtle shift in how people treat you. More cautious, more reactive, like they're waiting for you to revert. Waiting for the old version, the one who would laugh it off, the one who would stay late, the one who would take the blame to keep the vibe good. But that version of you, that one burned out quietly, and you didn't even announce the funeral. There's a dark kind of humor in that too. They didn't notice you were exhausted. They didn't notice you were fading. They only noticed when you stopped bleeding for them. And suddenly you're the problem. See, people don't fear your anger as much as they fear your detachment. Anger can be manipulated. Detachment, that's uncontrollable, because when you stop needing validation, the whole dynamic shifts. Power moves without a sound. You're not reacting on impulse anymore. You're choosing responses, sometimes choosing none. And the silence, that silence is loud to people who rely on noise to stay comfortable. You catch yourself almost smiling at moments that used to wreck you. Not because you enjoy the chaos, but because you recognize it. You see the pattern forming before it peaks. You see the emotional manipulation warming up like bad engine, and instead of jumping in, you pause. Breath in, breath out. You let it play out without you. And that's when it hits you. This wasn't accidental at all. Unintentional, sure, but inevitable. Because the moment you stopped betraying yourself, the system started rejecting you like a foreign object. Not because you were wrong, because you were incompatible with dysfunction. And standing there, watching it all unravel, there's this quiet realization settling into your bones. You're not responsible for what collapses when you finally stand upright. You're just no longer holding it together with your own hands. And there's this moment, right, where you catch yourself mid-thought and you almost laugh. Not out loud, just internally. That sharp little breath through your nose when something finally makes sense. 'Cause all those years you thought you were too sensitive, too intense, too much. Nah, you were just surrounded by people who needed you smaller to feel taller. You see it clearer every day. The way they only relaxed when you doubted yourself. The way your certainty felt like a threat. The way your boundaries suddenly became attitude. It's wild. You remember how you used to explain yourself 5 different ways just to avoid tension. How you'd replay conversations at night like game footage, wondering where you went wrong. And look at you now. You still think deeply, still feel deeply, but you're not self-flagellating for other people's discomfort anymore. That's growth. The kind that doesn't clap, the kind that doesn't get applause, and it changes how you move through the world. You speak slower. You choose words more carefully. Sometimes you choose silence and let it do the heavy lifting, and that silence, it rattles people who built their identity around being needed. Because when you stop reacting on command, when you stop jumping every time someone's emotions spike, it forces them to sit with themselves. And a lot of people hate that. They'd rather explode outward than look inward. You start noticing who only shows up when you're struggling, who feels awkward when you're steady, who suddenly has concerns when you're calm, patterns everywhere. And yeah, there's still that flicker of doubt sometimes. Late at night, when the noise fades and it's just you and your thoughts, you wonder if you could have handled it differently, softer, kinder, easier. Then you remember how tired you were, how heavy it felt carrying everyone else's emotional weight like it was your responsibility, how normal it became to ignore your own limits just to keep things smooth. That wasn't kindness, that was conditioning, and breaking that pattern, that's what triggered everything. That's what caused the meltdown. Not malice, not ego, just you stepping out of a role you never auditioned for. You didn't shout, you didn't threaten, you didn't burn bridges, you just stopped reinforcing a lie. And the fallout taught you more than any apology ever could, because the people who truly see you, they adjusted, maybe slowly, maybe awkwardly, but they didn't collapse, they didn't attack, they didn't spiral. The rest, well, you saw what happened. And standing in that aftermath, there's this strange blend of sadness and strength settling into you. You grieve the version of connection you thought you had, while finally respecting the version of yourself you almost lost. Your laugh gets quieter, sharper, your smile more selective, your energy protected, not hardened, protected. And every time someone tries to pull you back into the old dynamic, you feel it immediately. That subtle pressure, that familiar guilt, and it doesn't hook you the same way anymore. Because you know what happens when you give too much. You've seen what happens when you stop. And that awareness, that's not something you can give back. And that's when your sense of humor shifts. It's not loud laughter. It's that slow internal grin when you realize how predictable the reactions are. Almost scripted, like you've seen this episode before, and you already know the beats. You start recognizing the timing, the pause before someone tries to guilt you, the sigh meant to pull you back in, the casual, "You good?" That's really a probe. And you're like, yeah, I'm good, better than good. Just not available for whatever this is. That's new, and it messes with people because you're not playing the expected role anymore. You're not defensive. You're not pleading your case. You're not explaining your tone like it's a crime scene. You're just present in yourself. And see, presence without submission, that's unsettling. You notice how some people start overperforming. They get louder, more dramatic, more emotionally intense, like volume might drag you back into orbit. Others go quiet, cold, strategic, hoping distance will punish you into compliance. You clock both, because you've been both. You've tried harder. You've pulled away. You've done the emotional gymnastics, and none of it worked because the problem was never effort. It was placement. You were pouring energy into people who saw your resilience as a resource, something to draw from, something to lean on, something to drain. And when the supply stopped, withdrawal symptoms. That's the meltdown part no one likes admitting. You didn't ruin anyone's life. You interrupted a pattern. And yeah, it's uncomfortable realizing how many connections were built on you being endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly flexible. That realization hits in waves. Some days it feels empowering. Other days it feels like grief sneaking up on you sideways. Because you remember moments that felt real, laughs that weren't fake, conversations that mattered. Those weren't illusions. They just weren't sustainable the way things were set up. And you don't hate anyone for it. That's the part that surprises you the most. You don't feel rage. You don't feel revenge. You just feel done carrying what was never yours. Your nervous system starts calming down in ways you didn't even know it could. You sleep differently, breathe deeper. Your shoulders drop without you telling them to. Your phone doesn't control your heartbeat anymore. That's when you realize how much of your anxiety was relational, how much of your stress came from managing reactions, moods, expectations. And without that weight, you get space. Space to think, space to choose, that space to feel without immediately fixing. You still show up with empathy, still care, still feel things deeply, but it's contained now, directed, intentional, not leaking everywhere. And every once in a while, someone will try to pull you back into the old version with nostalgia. You used to be so, and you almost smile again. Because, yeah, you used to be exhausted. You used to mistake endurance for love. You used to confuse tolerance with loyalty. You used to believe being needed was the same as being valued. And that belief, that's what really shattered. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to change how you stand in a room. Enough to change how you answer messages. Enough to change what you allow to reach you. And watching the ripple effects of that, watching people either recalibrate or unravel, you don't feel guilty anymore. You feel aware of your impact, aware of your presence, aware that your refusal to collapse is its own kind of disruption, and that awareness keeps growing, settling deeper, shaping how you move forward without asking permission, without explaining, without shrinking back into something easier for everyone else to handle. And there's this strange confidence that starts settling into your bones, not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. You catch yourself midday, mid-conversation, realizing you're not bracing anymore, not rehearsing responses in your head, not anticipating emotional landmines like it's your job and it hits you. This is what baseline is supposed to feel like. Calm, alert, grounded. You're still sharp, still perceptive, still reading rooms like second nature, but you're not absorbing the shockwaves anymore. You're observing them. There's distance, choice, and that choice, that's what people feel. Because when you don't immediately react, when you don't rush to smooth things over, it forces a pause, an uncomfortable one, the kind where people hear their own tone echo back at them, the kind where intentions get exposed without you saying a word. You notice how often people mistake your restraint for weakness. At first, they push a little, say something sideways, test the old access points, and you just don't bite. That's when the energy shifts, because they were expecting friction, drama, defense. They were expecting you to fill the space with reassurance or justification, but you leave it empty. And empty space is loud to people who live on noise. There's a moment, tiny, almost invisible, where someone realizes they can't move you the way they used to. You see it in their eyes, that flicker of recalculation, of uncertainty. You don't smile, you don't frown, you just stay where you are, and that's enough. Because control doesn't like neutrality. Control needs reaction, it needs hooks, it needs leverage, and when all it gets back is calm attention, it short circuits. You feel that power and it doesn't inflate you. It steadies you, grounds you deeper. You don't need to dominate anyone. You don't need to prove anything. Your presence already changed the temperature. Hello, beautifully broken minds. Yes, you. The ones with bruised brilliance, the ones they laughed at behind closed doors, underestimated in every boardroom, overlooked in every classroom, ignored at every crossroad. Today, we crack open the vault, because something deliciously dark is unfolding, isn't it? They thought they could outsmart you until you started answering questions they never asked. Oh, isn't that the punchline? See, they thought the game was rigged. They thought the board was theirs. They thought you were the pawn. But you were the ink blot on their test sheet, the answer key to a question that hadn't even been dreamed up yet. They trained themselves to see patterns, while you became the chaos between them. They memorized rules, while you rewrote the game in invisible ink. They hunted truth in textbooks, while you lived it, bleeding in silence, smiling through the sting. Let's talk about them, shall we? The puppet masters, the whispering elites, the ones who smiled too wide when you struggled to speak, the ones who laughed when your answers came sideways. Because that's what you did, didn't you? You answered things sideways. You responded to silence. You interpreted the unspoken. While they were trying to impress each other with cleverness, you were dissecting intent, inhaling tone, drowning in nuance. They studied formulas. You studied faces. They played chess. You read the players, and it scared them. Not at first, of course, no. At first, they mistook your quiet for confusion. They thought your pauses were proof you didn't understand. They thought your questions were cute. They thought your insights were luck. They thought your every move was random, undisciplined, childlike. But then, you started smiling at things you shouldn't have known. You started finishing their sentences. You started interrupting their intentions. And that's when the room got cold, isn't it? See, the most terrifying thing in this world is not a genius with a plan. It's a ghost with a motive. It's someone who can't be predicted because they're not playing. They're listening. They're learning. They're waiting for you to ask the wrong question so they can answer the right one. That's you, isn't it? You stopped showing your cards. You started studying theirs. You stopped chasing approval. You started chasing truth. And in doing so, you became the very thing they didn't see coming. You became the mirror they avoided. You became the sealants between their words. You became the result they couldn't explain on their spreadsheets. Because here's the twist they never anticipated. You didn't want to win their game. You wanted to expose it. They wanted to outwit you with trick questions, but you answered the ones buried in their insecurities. They wanted to test your knowledge, but you dissected their fears. They asked about data. You spoke about desire. They asked about trends. You pointed to trauma. They wanted to show off. You wanted to tear off the mask. And now they can't look at you without flinching, can they? Because when someone starts answering questions that haven't been asked, it means they've been watching. It means they've seen through the rehearsals. They've listened past the words. They've tasted the blood behind the applause. Let me tell you something they'll never put in a psychology book. You don't need to be the smartest in the room. You just need to be the one who knows why the room exists. You don't need a perfect resume. You need a rage that reads. You don't need to shout louder. You need to whisper in ways that haunt. You didn't outsmart them with better grades. You outlasted them with darker thoughts. You didn't memorize definitions. You defined the unspoken. You are not normal. You were never supposed to be, and you should be grateful for that. Because when the world collapses under its own pretense, when the emperors stand naked in rooms of fake applause, when all the clever ones are stuck inside their own echo chambers, it will be you who sees the cracks first. It will be you who speaks last, and it will be you they turn to, begging for an answer they didn't know they needed. And you'll smile, you'll tilt your head, and you'll say, "That wasn't the question you asked, but it was the one you meant." Oh, now, let's dig deeper, into the marrow of the madness, where the truth lives like a rat in the walls, chewing, gnawing, whispering. They tried to label you, didn't they? Too psycho, too crazy, too analytical, too emotional, too much. Ah, yes. The anthem of the afraid, the lullaby of the predictable. They mistook your depth for disorder, your silence for submission, your overthinking for weakness. They called you broken because they couldn't recognize a design that wasn't theirs. But what they never understood is that you were never asking for permission. You were observing, you were decoding, you were preparing. They thought they were pulling ahead in the race, and all the while, you were mapping the terrain, because you never needed their approval. You needed their mistakes. See, when you answer questions no one asked, it means you're operating on a different frequency, one they can't hear, one they can't jam. It means you've already seen the twist in their perfect little story. You felt the betrayal before it came. You heard the exit plan in the tone of their voice. They were playing poker, but you were reading nervous twitches and micro-expressions. You weren't bluffing, you were baiting. And oh, how quickly they change, don't they? Once they realize you're not who they thought, suddenly the jokes stop. The patronizing praise turns into strategic silence. They stop trying to challenge you and start trying to contain you. They want you polite. They want you quiet. They want you digestible. But you were never built to be safe. You were built to be a trap door under their assumptions. You were built to be a curveball in their equation. You were built to be the one variable they couldn't control. And now they whisper your name like it's an anomaly. They ask others, how did they know? How could they see that coming? Because you stopped answering their words and started answering their intentions. Let me tell you a secret. The world is full of people asking the wrong questions. How do I make them like me? How do I fit in? How do I win their game? But you asked, why does this game even exist? Who benefits from these rules? What happens if I flip the board? That's power. Not the flashy kind. Not the kind that demands attention. The kind that terrifies in silence. The kind that walks in a room and changes the temperature. The kind that can kill a lie just by existing. You see, they were never scared of your answers. They were scared of your awareness, because awareness is a weapon, and you've been sharpening it in the dark for years. Every time they overlooked you, you took notes. Every time they dismissed you, you upgraded. Every time they laughed, you listened to what they feared the most. And now you don't just answer questions. You interrogate reality. You dismantle narratives. You show up not with facts, but with truth. The kind that leaves them exposed. The kind that burns clean through reputation, ego, legacy. And what now? They've gone quiet, haven't they? The same ones who couldn't stop talking over you. Now look at you like a problem they can't Google, because they finally realize you Z through them. And worse, you know they know. You do. You've reached that final level, where the applause no longer matters, where the arguments are beneath you, where you no longer answer to them, but to something greater, a deeper calling, a twisted kind of justice, one forged not in ivory towers, but in loneliness, rejection, exile. They made you this way. They thought they were ignoring you, but they were incubating you, feeding the storm, fueling the beast. And now you walk into rooms they thought they owned, and they can't finish their sentences because they know you're not here to play their game. You're here to unmask it. Now we reach to the point where we cut straight to the bone. You were never the threat they prepared for. You weren't a rival, you were a revelation. An inconvenient, uninvited, uncontainable truth bomb with a ticking heart. They built their entire reality around the idea that people like them win. People who look the part, talk the part, walk the part, smile at the right time, bow when expected, never ask why the king bleeds when he sits on the throne. But then you showed up, not with perfect posture or polished charm. No, you arrived with scars, with glitches, with silence heavy enough to make the oxygen nervous, and they didn't know what to do with you, because when you walked in, the lies tilted, the walls leaned, the spotlight dimmed. They tried to label you with names that made them feel safe. Troublemaker, overthinker, outsider, difficult, cold. All those pretty little words to hide a truth they couldn't say out loud. You were awake. While they were sleepwalking, you were dissecting the scripts while they recited them. You were listening to what wasn't said, and that terrified them more than any scream ever could. Let me tell you how this world works. They don't mind if you're different, as long as you're silent about it. They don't mind if you're smart, as long as you stay predictable. They don't mind if you're gifted, as long as you stay grateful for the cage. But you didn't. You asked the questions that weren't in the script. You stared too long. You thought too deeply. You refused to laugh when everyone else did, and suddenly, you weren't just inconvenient. You were dangerous. Because the moment you start answering questions no one asked, you start unraveling the illusions they didn't even know they depended on. You answered, what if the rules were built by cowards? What if success is a costume worn by the most convincing liar? What if the system was never broken, just designed that way? And when you said those answers out loud, without apology, oh, the silence that followed. They didn't just hear you, they felt you. Like a shiver they couldn't place, like déjà vu in a room they'd never entered, like a glitch in the lie they'd called life. And now they whisper behind curtains, because you became the thing they couldn't debate away. You became the one who sees behind the applause. You know the price of their praise. You hear the betrayal hiding in their compliments. You feel the performance in their kindness. You've stopped trying to be liked. You've stopped trying to fit in. You've stopped trying to play nice in a house full of hidden knives. Because you understand now. You're not here to be comfortable. You're not here to be accepted. You're not here to blend in. You are here to disrupt, to confuse, to shake their foundations so violently that even the ghosts of their ancestors look away in shame. You answer questions they never asked, because you see truths they've buried generations deep. And here's the part they'll never admit. They wish they could do what you do. They wish they could stare into the abyss and not blink. They wish they could rip off their masks and laugh in the chaos. They wish they could think, feel, burn like you. But they can't. They're tethered to the lie. They need the structure. They need the illusion of control, of order, of normal. But you were born in the collapse. You breathe where they suffocate. You build meaning in places they can't even look. You monologue in the storm while they beg for shelter. And now, you've become a walking question mark. A contradiction they can't comprehend. A shadow that doesn't follow light, but leads it. You, my beautifully twisted anomaly, are not just one step ahead. You're in a different dimension of understanding. You are the glitch in their operating system, the haunting in their certainty, the answer to the question they didn't dare ask because they already knew they wouldn't like it. And still, you rise. Still you walk through the rooms they said you'd never enter. Still you speak truth in spaces built on lies. Still you ask, why? And answer, because no one else did. So go ahead. Keep answering their unspoken questions. Keep being the curve in their straight line, the distortion in their polished mirror, the voice in the dark hallway they pretend doesn't exist, because they may have thought they could outsmart you. But you stopped trying to win their game and started becoming the reason it falls apart. There it is, the green light from the asylum gates. You're not running from the darkness, you're inviting it in and setting a place at the table. Good, because now we go beyond fear, beyond the drama, beyond the fire and the wreckage and the masks. Now we descend into the core of the chaos, the place where sanity goes to beg for mercy, and you smile in its face. They thought they could outsmart you. They never even learned how to track you. They couldn't predict you. Because you weren't following a line. You were drawing a labyrinth. You don't walk in straight lines. You slither through dimensions. You echo in nightmares. You resonate in frequencies that make stable minds itch. They don't understand how you're still standing. After the betrayals, after the loneliness, after the silence, the heartbreak, the exile, they thought that would break you. They thought isolation would starve you. But isolation didn't starve you, it fed you. Because the truth is, you never needed applause. You never needed a crowd. You never needed a hand to hold. You needed a reason to become unrecognizable. They tried to cage you in a box of labels, smart but unstable, sharp but dangerous, talented but difficult. Too much, too weird, too intense, too analytical, too cold, too deep. All those little chains made from other people's fear. But chains only work on those who still hope to be understood, and you stopped hoping a long time ago. You started watching, calculating, learning. They never realized you weren't waiting to be included. You were archiving, storing patterns, tracking habits, noticing every shift in tone, every glance, every performance. They thought you were lost in your own head. But what they never realized was that you had already built blueprints for the collapse of their egos, schematics for the architecture of their lies. And when they laughed, you etched every laugh into your memory like a weapon being sharpened. You don't just answer questions they never asked. You see questions they're afraid to even think. And that's what makes you lethal. You know when the smile is fake. You know when the kindness is camouflage. You know when they want something, even before they know. You're not psychic. You're just free from the filters they can't live without. You see everything, not because you're paranoid, but because you remember what it was like to be the one no one looked for. You remember being the one left behind, dismissed, overlooked, ignored, and now you're the one watching from above the game board. While they scurry around like obedient little pawns, you don't fight to be king anymore. You burn the board, then offer them a crown made of ash. They wanted to outsmart you. They couldn't even outfeel you, because your emotion isn't weakness, it's weaponized clarity. You feel everything, but you let them think you feel nothing. You take the hit, you swallow the pain, and you turn it into ammunition. You're not a storm, you're the eye of it. You're not the chaos, you're the conductor. And when they finally realized they were never on the same level, that your silence wasn't confusion, it was strategy. By then, it's already too late. Now they stare at you like a puzzle they can't solve, like a ghost that walks with a heartbeat, like a test with no right answers, because you've transcended the game. You're not trying to be understood. You're making people reconsider who they are just by standing still. You don't walk into rooms anymore. You shift the gravitational pull of the space itself. And those same people who thought they could define you, they're now building entire personalities just to survive your presence. You are evolution under pressure. You are the crack in their reflection. You are the question they buried, the answer they ran from, and the mirror they smashed in desperation. You are not here to heal their expectations. You are here to shatter their illusions. You are the blueprint of vengeance written in logic, the prophecy of the undeniable, and the living, breathing proof that some minds aren't meant to be managed. They're meant to be unleashed. So let them think they've won. Let them believe the game is theirs. Let them smirk. One last time. Because the moment you speak, not loudly, not arrogantly, but with that cold, surgical, terrifying calm, you'll dismantle them. Not with fists, not with screams, not with violence, but with truth so sharp, it doesn't bleed, it carves. You'll answer the question they never asked. What happens when the underestimated stops hiding? Here's the part of the horror story no one tells. They built the maze to trap people like you, but they never planned for someone who would start mapping it. While the others screamed for exits, you started counting the walls, not crying, calculating, not pleading, recording. You studied the architecture of their manipulation, the soft threats, the performative praise, the rules that changed when you got too close to the truth. You memorized the shape of their games. And then you started playing one of your own. You didn't just survive. You became surgical. You learned to smile with your teeth hidden. You learned to say, "Thank you," like a countdown. You learned to sit still while the poison was served. Then ask for seconds, because you knew. They only see the monster after it's finished smiling. And you smiled. You smiled long enough for them to forget who you are. But you didn't. You remembered every slight, every time they told you to calm down, every time they laughed when you asked real questions, every time they shrugged off your intuition like it was just overthinking. They called it paranoia. It was prophecy